Get ready. Get ready. Come on. Get ready for Betty, Tracy, Michelle, Phyllis, and Stephanie. A new show called Good Grief, Good Gossip, Good God, call it G3. Education, celebration, transparency. There's no subject that they won't tackle if it uplifts you and me. Good grief, good gossip, good God, G3.
Hello and welcome to Good Grief, Good Gossip, Good God. We are so delighted that you tuned in with us this evening. I'm Stephanie Lackey, one of your hosts, and I'm joined with my spectacular co-host, Tracy Johnson. And we have an outstanding and interesting show lined up for you this evening. We are so excited to share with you our personal stories, and we would like you to get to know us better. In fact, this evening's show is titled Transparent Me, My Adoption Journey. It is our hope that we inspire and encourage others who have been adopted and those who are considering adopting. In addition to sharing our adoption stories, we have a special and dynamic guest who will share their adoption journey. In addition to that, we have an outstanding expert who specializes in child and adolescent psychology. But before we get to that, I would like to share a couple of statistics in regards to adoption. Nearly 100 million Americans have experienced adoption in their immediate families. Today, there are 7 million adopted people in the United States, and 140,000 children are adopted each year in the United States. I would also like to share our good gossip, which comes from the book of Ephesians 1:5. In love, he predestined us to be adopted as his sons through Jesus Christ, in accordance with his pleasure and will. Under this belief, we are all equals in the eyes of God, and he has called us worthy. In adoption, every child deserves to and is worthy of being a part of a family.
That's right, Stephanie, and we've got some awesome guests to help us unpack this topic today. So I'd like to introduce them. We know him as the creative force behind so many iconic sculptures across this country, from the Amistad Memorial that stands in New Haven, Connecticut, from the Lincoln on the waterfront right here in Louisville, Kentucky, and probably most notably, the Spirit of Freedom Monument that stands in Washington, D.C. He's received a doctorate degree from Spalding University and has gotten several honorary doctorates, and we're so excited to have him here today. But he's not going to be talking about his professional journey. Today, Mr. Ed Hamilton is going to be talking about his personal adoption journey. So we'll hear from him in just a few minutes, so welcome.
Thank you.
We also have Dr. Felicia Smith, and as Stephanie referenced, she is the co-owner of Strong Mind Psychology right here in Louisville, Kentucky. And Felicia is a graduate of the University of Illinois. She received her PhD at the University of Virginia, and she did her internship and postdoc work at Harvard Medical School in the Children's Hospital there. So we are so fortunate to have her in our community and with us here today. Welcome, Felicia.
Welcome.
So I'm going to kick us off and talk about my adoption journey, which I think is kind of normal. And it'll be nice to hear your stories after I tell mine. So I was adopted when I was 3 months old, and my family, mother, father, and a brother. I have a brother who's 8 years older than I am, and he is my parents' biological son. And they just wanted to have a second child and couldn't do it, and they wanted a daughter, and so here I come. And so I've always known that I was adopted. So there was never a day that they sat me down and said, you're adopted. So I've always known. And I've always been really good with it. My parents gave me this book, and it still sits in my parents' home today, called Why Was I Adopted? And I started reading it when I was probably 8 years old, and read it off and on throughout the years, and it really explained why I was potentially given up. It could be that my parents were young, they weren't married, they were in school, all of these things, economic issues, and I was okay with that. But what it really helped me see is that my family, who I was with, they really wanted me. They sought after me, they waited for me, they prayed for me, and so I kind of grew up feeling like I was special. I guess every kid should feel like they're special, but I kind of grew up feeling like I was special. And of course I got teased some because my complexion is very different from my family, and I didn't really look like them. But kids are teased about many things, so that was my cross to bear. And as I got older, I was very comfortable, sharing my story with people. It wasn't what I always led with, but I would, freely tell people. I often got asked, are you interested in your birth family, your mother? And interestingly enough, I was curious, but very much on a superficial level, because I just wanted to know what they looked like. I didn't see people who looked like me. So I wanted to know what they looked like, but I never wanted a relationship with them. Interestingly enough, I looked at it very pragmatically, and I thought that I might be a secret to somebody, I might be something that's painful to somebody, so I didn't want to let that genie out of the bottle. And so I kind of thought, can I live without knowing? And I decided that I could. And of course I didn't want to hurt my parents because they were awesome. And I kind of took it as assumed that was the way God designed our family to be formed. The family that I was in was through adoption. So now I'm in my late 40s, and I haven't sought my parents. And maybe I'll change my mind after hearing some stories here. But as of now, I think that I'm okay with where I am. So, but yeah, Stephanie, I would love to hear your story. We really connected on this issue because we had some similarities and then also some differences.
Absolutely, absolutely. And thanks for sharing your story. I think of it as there's no greater love, right? So, maybe we weren't, biologically born to our parents, but, we were loved tremendously, like you stated so eloquently, that, we were chosen, right? They prayed for us, they wanted us. And in my case, I was adopted at 2 months. My mom and dad actually kept foster children. And so I started off as a foster child. My biological mom was very young, and I found out later in life, in my 40s, that she was 17, still in college, getting ready to graduate, and did not want the family stigma of having a child out of wedlock. So, she went away to have me and left me in the hospital. So, I've dealt with my whole entire life abandonment issues because of it, but I also feel as if I was from a greater love, because I grew up with parents who I didn't have to want for anything. We weren't rich. We weren't middle class. We were poor. I didn't know it because I had shelter, I had clothes, I had friends, I had their love. I knew I was different as well because I was of the lighter complexion. And it was always communicated to me that, one of your parents was probably of a Caucasian race, right? So I grew up with this identity thing thinking, oh, okay, so I'm mixed. And then I also got teased a lot. So it was my cross to bear as well. But, over the years, I wanted to know, and I would talk to my mom and dad about it, every now and again, and they were supportive and said that they would help me find them if I really wanted to do that. But I waited, and they have since passed on. And I waited until that point, and a couple of years after my mom passed, I was able to find my biological mother. And I tell you, it did open up a whole lot. I mean, it was just a whole lot. And I'm glad I found her. I'm glad I found extended family. I've been able to learn a lot about myself medically, and as well as just a lot of history, rich history. We're not close. We know where we live, and we check in with each other every now and again. But I also wanted to know who my biological father, was, because at this point I still didn't know if he was Caucasian, because she's African American. they didn't have a good relationship, and come to find out, fast forward, she never told him about me. So I had the opportunity of finding him last year around the holiday time. And when we first saw each other, it's like, oh my gosh, instant love, because I'm like looking at myself and he's looking at me like, oh my goodness, you know, I wish I would have found you a long time ago, you know, and we've had a great relationship. We have a lot in common, from cycling to entrepreneurship, just a lot in common. And I'm so glad that I pursued finding my biological parents. I'm still learning a lot about myself. And yes, he is African American. So, you know, at the age of, back then, what was that, 52, I'm 53 now, I found out that I am fully African American. But, you know, so it's all those dynamics, right, through my adoption journey. But one thing I can say, and I've shared this with Tracy, is that I lived my life to the fullest. You know, I am just coming into my own, where I can speak freely about this and not feel ashamed and not feel like, oh, I wasn't wanted, you know, because I really was wanted, but in a special way, a greater love. Yes,
That's
yes,
great.
yes.
That's a great story.
Thank you, Mr. Ed Hamilton.
I tell you. My story started at 6 and Walnut Street. If you don't know anything about Walnut Street, that they called it the Gold Coast. That was all the black business district from 6th and Walnut all the way down to 28th Street. My dad was a tailor and my mom was a barber. So I grew up in a barber shop, tailor shop combination. I always felt that, you know how sometimes you feel like there's a window that just doesn't close all the way? As I was growing up, there was just something I just could not put my fingers on. I always realized that I was born in Cincinnati, Ohio, but nobody ever said why, you know, like, and I knew we would go, my dad would take me to the Crosley Field, the baseball park, for the baseball. So I'm thinking, well, maybe, and this is what I had envisioned all while I was growing up, that mom was pregnant. We were up in Cincinnati. She couldn't make it back to Louisville. Voila, I popped up. Well, it was great, because that's all I had, okay? Then there wasn't that many baby pictures. One major baby picture that sat on their bureau. I often wondered, where are the little baby pictures, you know? So, after I grew up, I always felt like mom was so possessive. If I went over to my auntie's house, she said, "What y'all talk about?" I said, "Mom, I don't, you know, we talk about it, just general conversation." I think she was so keen on keeping this secret, you know, that she challenged everybody. If they opened up their mouth, she was probably going to kill them. Because after I found out that I had been adopted, I asked my cousins and all my other relatives, I said, "Did you know?" "Oh yeah, we know. But your mama, she cut it to the quick. Wasn't no telling you at all." So when mom got sick, she lived to be 90. She would have been 99 had she would have been 100, actually. I had to put her in the hospital. And in getting her to the hospital, I was looking for all the papers and stuff. And I happened to raise up her mattress under her bed, and there was this little purse under it. I didn't pay any attention to it. I just picked it up, threw it in a bag, got to the hospital. They admitted her, they kept her. I got home that evening and didn't pay any attention to the stuff that I put in the bag. Got myself a Maker's Mark, sat down, started going through the bag, opened up this little change purse. This yellow paper, folded all 20 different ways. I opened it up. It was the actual adoption paper.
Wow.
She had kept that paper. Now, my question is, why would she have done that if she didn't want me to know? But she never really said anything about it, okay? My curiosity got the best of it because it was at that moment that, now I know why this window was never shut closely. Mm-hmm. Because I had started writing a book on the making of the Spirit of Freedom in Washington, D.C. And I had my dear friend Juanita White, who does a lot of genealogy, works with writings and stuff like that, had her kind of helping me. And she said, well, you need to talk about your family and where you come from, blah, blah, blah. And so I said, oh, yeah, that's great. I'm thinking I got it all. I know my dad comes from Bardstown, Kentucky. Mm-hmm. Mama was born in what they call Little Africa down in the West End, here in Louisville. But I could never put myself into the picture of, the history of me being a part of that, of them. I look like them. So I stopped that portion of the book. I said, you know what? Now I've got to find out this story. So I literally went down to the children's court and petitioned for my records. And they said, well, what reasoning are you bringing to this table to ask for your records? I said, well, since I've been adopted, I have no medical history. I don't have the blood of the people that raised me. I need to know something about my medical situation, if I can find it out, So they took that. It took a year to get that. I got the phone call. I said, Ms. Hamilton, we have the file. I'd like to come see it. I got there. We had a stack, this thick file. She handed it to me and said, now, you can't take anything away from it, but you're welcome to look through it and we'll make a copy. So sit there. I sat at this table, put it down, and I just looked at it. And I thought to myself, do I really want to know what's in this file? Sat there probably another 5-10 minutes, and finally once I opened it, I couldn't go back. Mm-hmm. I found out that my birth mother was 15 years old. She'd been molested by her father. Mm-hmm. She lived in Dayton. I was born at the Catherine Boone School for Girls, Cincinnati. Stayed there for probably a year or two. When she had me, she was supposed to leave. They weren't supposed to stay there. Only reason why she was allowed to come back and see me and visit me, hold me. She played the piano, played classical music on the piano, and the nuns allowed her to come in and do this. Okay? That her favorite song was Debussy, Claire de Lune. She played it. So, fast forward to the 50s, 49 to 50, Amy Hamilton and Edward N. Hamilton Sr. were my adopted parents. I was brought to Louisville in the 50s and had no idea that these two great parents of mine, who were entrepreneurs, and I just had to run up Walnut Street, I mean, I just had it was just a wonderful, it was a great growing up, okay? I asked Juanita White, I said, Juanita, we need to find this later. Her name was Virginia Rakestraw. She found her. She made the initial call to Virginia. She called me back. She said, Ed, Virginia wants to talk to you. I said, oh my God. I called her and I said, I think I'm your son. She said, yes.
Wow, that's amazing.
That is amazing. Amazing.
She said she always had this reoccurring dream of babies floating, but she never could. So what I found out was she's my birth mother, lived in Dayton, had 2 sisters and 2 brothers. Paula was one sister, Debbie was my other sister, John Rakestraw, the younger brother, and Kevin Rakestraw, older. I'm the old, obviously I'm the oldest, I was firstborn. And actually now he is the only one, and Johnny and Kevin are the only 2 left now. Mother died 3 years ago. Paula was my older sister. She passed away. Debbie died a year ago. We had a good 13 years relationship. And what I wanted to show you, she was a prolific writer. When I was graduating from art school, she was graduating from fashion school. She sewed, she made clothes. She actually worked, her real job was working at the WCA for women. And they just loved her at that YWCA. This binder is all sorts of letters that I have documented that she would send me. It was unbelievable. Now, how did that affect me?
Yes.
In the beginning, I thought about it and I wasn't mad at my mom, but I questioned, why didn't she tell me? I figured that was out of love.
Yes.
And not wanting to share me with anybody. Once she took
And
possession.
probably fear too. I mean,
Fear,
I think there's
and
that.
I'm glad it didn't happen at an early age. Because what if I'd have found out at 15 or 16?
Right.
How would that have affected me?
And
So,
especially with your birth mom being so close.
Yes.
Dayton is just up, you know, just right
Yeah.
up the street, really.
And you know, Dr. Smith, it would be great to hear a little bit from you. You've heard our stories, and they're all very different. And I just am so interested in Mr. Hamilton's story because there is that you know, secrets. There was a feeling, something that you knew maybe was wrong, and just fast forward to today, right? Because things are very different today. I mean, how do you work with families or counsel people who have adopted children or who are thinking about adoption? You know, how do you counsel them in talking about adoption?
Yes, a great question, and I just want to say that your stories are all so powerful, and I know that you will touch many people by sharing them today. And in addition to the differences, I hear many commonalities across your stories, right? You know, discovery and joy and pain and curiosity, and so you know, thinking about all of those challenges that are a part of the adoptive process, there are a few recommendations that I share with families who are considering adoption or who have adopted children. And one would be the importance of helping that child develop their adoptive narrative as early as possible. So sharing in an appropriate, developmentally appropriate way that they have been adopted, you know, that, and most importantly, helping them to appreciate that this was an act of love. It's very important that they develop some sense of positivity and and genuine love as they understand the decision that their birth family made and that their adoptive family made in choosing to make a change in the family status for that child. And sometimes it's hard to describe the birth family situation as an act of love, right? Sometimes it's a difficult situation, and as you shared, Mr. Hamilton, there can be some really painful experiences for that birth family. So it may be harder to describe that in a positive way. And so we think about the decision by the adoptive family to select you, to choose you, to pray for you. That's an act of love. Maybe faith helps to fill in the gaps for the birth family, and that God doesn't make any mistakes. And as you cited in the scripture, that you are worthy, that God made you worthy, that this is the family that He crafted for you. So we want that birth narrative, that adoptive narrative, to be one that is positive and loving. It is how they begin to develop the foundation of who they are, of their identity. And identity development is a critical task of childhood. And so we need to help them to create that foundation of what their past is about, and that helps them understand who they are currently as they're moving through their adolescence in particular, and it helps them to project themselves into the future. So it's laying the groundwork.
And I think that identity piece, especially for me in my case, not knowing the races of my biological family. Have you counseled or helped children and even adolescents, and I guess even adults, kind of deal with that, not knowing, and then finding out? It's like, oh, it's like a big relief. It was a big relief for me, is how I said. I'm like, oh, praise God.
Okay. That's what I hope for.
That's what I hope for. But you know, but up until 52, it was that not knowing.
The not
that
knowing
window that you spoke of just, I want to know, but it's when is it? When am I going to get, Lord? When am I going to get this information? You know, how am I? You know, how should I act? Because then you think about the world today, right? And the division,
right?
And even among our own culture, you know, the things that happen when we speak of race and knowing who you are.
Absolutely.
I mean, that was a struggle for me, right? So have you dealt with that a lot with?
Oh, you raised so many important points in that. And I will say that developing your identity as an adopted child is more complex. There's some complexities that children who grow up with their birth families do not have because of the unanswered questions. What do my birth parents look like? Do I have any siblings? What do they think of me? Do they think of me often? Right? So those are questions that children who are not adopted don't have to wonder about. And you may have some answers to those questions, but some may remain unanswered. And so that is a reality that an adopted child has to learn to navigate for themselves, right? I want to say something about the question you raised about, or the topic of race and the role that it plays in adoption. So we know that currently about 75% of adopting parents are white, but only about 35% of adopted children are white, right? And so quite frankly, what that means is that if white parents aren't adopting our Black and brown children, then they will spend a lot of their time in foster homes, and maybe many foster homes, and also residential facilities, which obviously brings with it its own set of challenges. So in these situations where we have parents who are adopting children who are of a different race or ethnicity, I talk with them about the importance of educating themselves about the cultural background of that child, and learning the customs and traditions, understanding food and history, because they are going to need to integrate that into their family life and into the developing identity of this child. And that it's really very important that child believes that you value that part of them, right? That
Yes.
part of their identity is meaningful to you, and what we don't want to do is ignore it or, become colorblind to it or, things of that nature, because in some ways it means you're not accepting a part of the child.
Right.
Right? So much of the work is in helping them to learn how to educate themselves. So maybe that's in books, maybe that's in relationships with other people in the community. So, immersing themselves in cultural opportunities that are around them that they otherwise may not have been a part of, churches and community groups and schools, and really connecting in those settings. So developing relationships with people who represent that group that has the commonality with your adopted child, and making sure your child is connected as well. We all know how important it is to see people around you that look like you, that remind you of parts of you, so that you can see what's to become, what the possibilities are for yourself. So families who, transracial adoptions are necessary.
Yep.
Because children need homes, and the challenges are unique, but cannot be overcome.
There's the debate between nurture versus nature, and I think it's really interesting, Mr. Hamilton, that you talked about your mother playing classical piano, and you're an artist, and then, I think that's.
I thought I got my talent from my parents that raised me.
Yes.
I know I got something from them. I got like you said, she always said I was special, that I could do anything, But there's another issue too within this adoption thing. My kids, when I discovered that I was going to find my birth mother, they wanted to know why. Why are you looking for that? Why are you looking for that? Well, I had to do it because I had to search my soul to find out who I really was, and the medical aspect of it too. But on the other side, my birth mother and my sibling, they were telling her, Mom, don't worry, he's going to find you. And eventually they came around, my kids, because she was, my mother that raised me and my birth mother was different as night and day. My mama who raised me was very possessive, very strict to the point where if I could escape on my roller skates, I did. You know what I'm saying? But my birth mother was so quiet, so calm, and they were just as different as night and day. You see? Which is why all these letters and correspondence, she just wrote letters. She wrote to my daughter, my son, my wife. I'd write to her, It was a blessing to be able to find. It was a blessing, I think, for her to have resolved now to know that son she gave away had a good life. Somebody took care of him. You see?
Yes.
Absolutely. And that's a great.
And that's important.
It's so important, a great outcome.
Yeah.
And I had both worlds, because I had my biological mother, who I think is very happy that I was raised in a loving, God-fearing home, but dealing with her own issues, right?
Right.
Because I was such a secret. And then, of course, the joy of meeting my birth father and us having this great relationship now. But there is that dynamic you have to think about when you meet your birth family. What are you walking into?
Right.
Are you walking into, someone who is so needy that they try to drain you of everything,
That's
or
right.
who maybe have so many issues? Or are you walking into love, more love, more of just learning about you? I look at it as I'm learning so much about myself at this season in my life, and it's such a blessing. And so that's kind of how I look at it. And I'm willing to share with anyone and help anyone just understand that there is love out there. But when you do encounter the negative, there's a way to handle that.
That's
too.
right.
because you don't have to let that come into your space, your personal space. You can love that person from a distance and be okay with it. Yeah.
I'm okay.
I'm okay.
Yeah, I'm definitely okay.
Yeah.
Something you said was interesting because that is my one thought in the back of my head since I have chosen not to find my biological family is, I would like to somehow let my mother know that I've never felt any ill will towards her. I've never been angry, and part of that is because I've had just a great family, but I've only felt gratitude and love towards her, and so I hope that in some way she's gotten that message from somebody else. But yeah, that is the one thing that would be nice to close the circle, close the loop on that.
And I have to say, I said that over and over again to both my biological mom and dad, because there is no ill will on my part, none whatsoever. Because like you two, I was raised in love, so I'm grateful. I am very thankful to God because think about the alternative.
That's right.
I mean, I couldn't have asked for a better upbringing. Really, I couldn't. So, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Well, thank you guys so much for joining us. I mean, we could probably talk for for another hour or so, but we won't. And if you guys want to get more information about Mr. Hamilton's artwork, please visit him on the web at hamiltonstudios.com, and then. Dr. Felicia Smith, an awesome resource, not just for this topic, but almost everything related to behavioral issues for children, adolescents, and young adults. And you can find her at strongmindpsychology.com. So again, thank you guys for joining us. Stephanie, thank you. This is really fun. This is really fun to do. And join us next time. We're so glad that you guys were here this evening on Good Grief, Good Gossip, Good God. We'll see you next time right here on SSC Live TV.